When you confuse the means for the end, two possibilities, two motives might be at play. Either you cannot comprehend, you cannot approach the end, the objective, or having seen, having glimpsed at it, you recoil, not wanting to approach. So this is where you make the means into an end. And this is what happens with hedonism. They take the pleasure, the sensation of pleasure, without exploring what it is, and then make it the objective. Others, like Christians, have done the same with the word love, with the sensation love. While others, having the same attitude, simply convert the word itself, the number, as the end, as the objective. Here, the representation of the world becomes the world itself. But of course, there would be confusion in the modern mind between subjective and objective. Of course, he would dismiss and deny any objective standard and make everything a matter of perspective. When you're protected, when you're sheltered, and the consequences are reduced, the costs are reduced, then there is no standard by which you can evaluate the judgment that preceded your actions. So if a girl chooses to wear a miniskirt with no panties and go out, knowing that there's a system there, institutions there to protect her, then she becomes emboldened more and more. She will be free with her sexuality. When there's a system there to give a young woman an abortion, she could erase the previous night's mistake. Or with a pill there to inhibit impregnation, she can become the biggest slut there is, because there is no cost. So she doesn't have to be very selective with who she goes to bed with. It's all then becomes a matter of immediate gratification, pleasure. The pleasure principle, since the cost, the risks are reduced. When somebody is protected by the system from the consequences of his inability to control his spending, he will become even more materialistic. When there's a system present protecting the individual from his own stupidity, then natural selection cannot intervene to resolve the dispute between subjective and objective, this philosophical candy cane everybody's sucking on. There is no dispute. There is no vagueness to it. If somebody chooses to have a Down syndrome baby on a matter of principle, then this will have consequences in the future. There is no debate unless there's a system there which helps this individual cope with his mistake, with his error in judgment. When survival is not on the line, then all of us can become very generous with our resources, with ourselves, with our principles. Even Christian universal love fails when in times of an absence of resources. Then who you love, who you share your resources with, becomes a matter of life and death and the here and the now. Only the most fanatical who still believe in an afterlife which are very few actually, because most Christians are fake. They are Christians in good times, but not in the bad times. Only they would actually live up to the Christian faith dogma, and perhaps sacrifice self on a matter of principle. In that case, God becomes a representation of their own conscience, and not wanting to shame themselves, not wanting to break the principles, the morals that they lived by their whole lives, not wanting to make their lives a big hypocrisy, a pretentious act, they might follow through and actually sacrifice self for their principle. So, as a general rule, the more severe the environment, the more significant, important the cost in relation to the benefit becomes. And the mind adapts to this, becoming more and more selective, more and more aware, because being conscious means being discriminating, becoming more and more discriminating with your actions, with your behavior, with your generosity, with who you share your body and your resources and your mind with. Realism begins with the perceived and then may advance towards the incomprehensible and deal with it metaphorically by symbolizing it, by giving it vague names. But for the nihilist, the process is the reverse, as everything with them. They begin with the incomprehensible and then attempt to rationalize it, to connect it to the earth. Instead of beginning from the ground, the earth, they begin from the sky, from the noumenon, and then attempt to connect this noumenon to the phenomenon. This automatically shows their motive, because they have to rationalize sometimes what is irrational. And this is most evident in Christianity, where in recent years they've tried to convert Christianity into a science and to teach it alongside evolution theory. So they begin with their irrational belief in this imaginary absolute, and then thinking backwards, top down, they try to connect it. They try to legitimize it by giving it some scientific garment. This is the case for all nihilists. Their irrationality is attempted to be reasoned. Once their reasoning is exposed as flawed, they run back to the irrational, where they can claim that they are forever misunderstood. Look at the Christians, how they always claim that whoever critiques Christianity and they cannot respond to using reason has failed to comprehend the Bible, the scripture. And this is the case with all nihilists, because their need precedes their exploration. So when their need is about to be exposed, their motive as being other than the exploration of world as it is, they run back to the metaphorical, where they can say that they are forever misinterpreted, that the one challenging or the one about to expose them has failed to comprehend. Parity is the product of social engineering. If you put two individuals in a controlled environment, forcing both of them to abide by the same rules, then of course their behavior will be the same. They will behave the same, almost the same. You can put even two different species within the same environment, controlled environment, like a human environment, in a city, let's say. And if you enforce a very strict set of rules, they will begin behaving as if they were of the same species. Parity, or the illusion of parity, is the social construct, not the opposite. It is not inequality which is the product of social factors. It is the illusion, the delusion, the myth of parity. Within the same system, with its rules of behavioral rules, rules of engagement, what is above and what is below tend towards the middle ground, the mediocre. So this is where they find equality, in the middle ground. if they wish to remain within the system's principles, the boundaries. Of course, there are instances where especially the superior, will attempt to break or to bend the rules, and this is where the cost comes in to prevent too much of this behavior from repeating itself. The absence of frontiers is what makes Abrahamic spirituality spread like wildfire, and what makes these nihilistic memes, philosophies so popular. It is population pressures coupled with resource stresses which force the imposition of certain type of thinking, a limitation on thinking, on behaving. If you think about it, our Earth is like a behavioral sink, like the experiment of the behavioral sink. You should look it up. And we are the rats within this behavioral sink, with no access to frontiers. We are forced to coexist, one on top of the other, and our behavior is affected by this fact. A woman's mind is like her womb, a void awaiting fertilization. This is why a woman always adapts so easily, adopts whatever principles she is born within, or are the strongest, the most impressive, the ones that dominate. And for this reason, she is a natural nurturer, the one who holds and repeats and preserves traditions. This also makes her the less loyal, because she gravitates towards power unintentionally. She simply cannot help herself. Being weak, she finds the strong too attractive, too seductive to resist. She wants to make herself the means towards this power's ends. This is why in modern systems where the alpha male has been abstracted, has become institution, she is the perfect servant of institutions, of the status quo. She abides by the laws, wants to preserve the rules. She gives birth, and she weans and she trains children, the perfect children for the particular ideal, for the particular meme. She is the filtering system of genes and memes, and sometimes the two might come into conflict, because memes have been around for a shorter period of time than genes. So sometimes the meme comes into conflict with genes that have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. And this is why women are always confused about who and what they are, and must always find themselves, and are always looking for an identity, a sense of self. Usually they find it in a male who gives them meaning, purpose, and identity. Confusion is to be expected when you've shrunk your perceptual event horizon, when you've dismissed your past, when you've rejected nature as a determining factor. Then you've abandoned yourself to the current, to currency, to what is most up to date, what is more in fashion, what is trending. In other words, you've become modern. And the confusion of the modern man and woman can be understood as that detachment from past, because past is an anchoring, and without an anchoring you are like a ship on the waves with no depth, no way to control except your sails perhaps, which soon become torn and tattered by the competing winds. Alienation is the symptom of this disease of the mind, this nihilistic meme. Fragmentation, the absence of a cohesion, is what creates this feminine mystique, what we know as the feminine mystique. Her indecisiveness, her mysteriousness, how she changes her mind constantly. It's because ideas in her mind are competing with each other. She has no central theme. She is prone to go with the flow, to be affected by the external. She is prone to be affected by trends, by the currents, by whatever is most popular and most immediate. She is pragmatic and practical, which means she's in tune with the environment as it is. Her event horizon does not go beyond it, not too much into the past and not too much into the future. Mixing and mingling would be an advantage when a species is directly affected by the environment, which is ironic given how moderns admire mixing and mingling and sampling and variation when they live in a very controlled environment where it doesn't shift, doesn't change as often as it would if they were living in nature. So I guess the reason for this is because the brain becomes bored within so much order, without any challenges, any severity to choices. So it compensates by variation, by the novel, by the different, constantly seeking excitement in it. Cynicism is the outcome of this modern disconnect from reality, this indifference to the consequences because there is no severity in them. We find in the modern this flippancy, this childlike innocence, this constant mirth, laughing away anything that challenges whatever cannot be integrated into his ideal world, because his ideal world can coexist within the real world because it is not challenged, it is not affected by it. It can be separate from the real world because there is a system there protecting the individual from this disconnect. When philosophy has become political, the standard is no longer the world, but it is humanity. The cult of victimhood changes the hierarchy from one measured by the strength of the individual, the group, to one measured by its weakness. The one that cries the loudest, who is the one most hurt, most in pain, most unjust, who's been wronged the most, is the one who's at the top of the totem pole. So everything has been inverted in classical nihilistic style.